The ship came down from the sky on a Tuesday morning in early spring. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built, a massive dark shape that blocked out the sun over the city of Chicago. People stopped in the streets and looked up. Cars crashed into each other as drivers forgot to watch the road. Children pointed at the sky and asked their parents what was happening. Nobody had an answer. Katie Morrison was standing on the deck of her naval ship when the alien vessel appeared. She was a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, 34 years old, with short red hair and tired eyes. She had fought in 2 wars and had seen many terrible things. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. The ship above Chicago was not from Earth. That much was clear to everyone who saw it. The message came through every radio, every television, every phone on the planet. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it clearly did not belong to any human. The voice belonged to Ambassador Kethrel, a representative of something called the Galactic Council. He explained that his people had been watching Earth for 300 years. They had seen humans grow from simple farmers to builders of nuclear weapons in a very short time. This worried them. The Galactic Council had decided that humanity was dangerous. Not because of what humans were now, but because of what they might become in the future. The Council had seen this pattern before with other species. Young civilizations that grew too fast always caused problems. The solution was simple. Earth would become a tributary world. Humans would work in mines on distant planets. Human inventions would be used for the benefit of the greater galactic civilization. If humans refused, the Council would destroy them. Katie listened to this message with a cold feeling in her stomach. She looked at the faces of her crew and saw the same fear in their eyes. Ensign Marcus Webb, her young tactical officer, was staring at his computer screen with shaking hands. He had pulled up all the data he could find about the alien ship. Katie walked over to stand beside him. "What can you tell me?" she asked quietly. Marcus pointed at the screen. "The ship has some kind of energy shield around it. It flickers every 47 seconds. There's a brief moment when part of the shield near the engines gets weaker. I don't know what it means, but I thought you should know." Katie memorized this information. She did not know if it would ever be useful, but her father had taught her to pay attention to small details. He always said that the difference between life and death was often hidden in things that most people ignored in Washington. President Daniel Cook gathered his advisors for an emergency meeting. The generals wanted to fight. They had nuclear weapons and millions of soldiers. Surely they could do something against one alien ship. The diplomats wanted to negotiate. Perhaps the Council could be reasoned with. Perhaps there was a deal to be made. The scientists wanted more time. They needed to study the alien technology. They needed to understand what they were facing. President Cook listened to all of them. He was a calm man in his 60s who had spent his whole life preparing for difficult decisions. But this decision was beyond anything he had imagined. The fate of the entire human race was in his hands. And he had no good options. The alien ambassador contacted Washington directly. Kethrel appeared on video screens, and for the first time, humans saw what they were dealing with. He was tall, perhaps 8 feet, with scales that shimmered like oil on water. He had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. When he spoke, his voice was cold and precise. "You have 72 hours to accept our terms," Kethrel said. "If you refuse, the Thresher fleet will arrive. 17 warships, each capable of destroying an entire continent. The Council prefers cooperation, but we are prepared to use force." President Cook asked if there was any alternative. Kethrel smiled. If the movement of his face could be called a smile, "There is always an alternative," he said. "You could choose extinction. Many species have made that choice. We do not recommend it." The transmission ended. The room was silent. Everyone understood what they had just heard. This was not a negotiation. This was an ultimatum. Surrender or die. Katie Morrison received her orders 6 hours later. She was to transport a diplomatic team to the alien ship. Secretary of State Margaret Ellis would lead the delegation. Their job was to buy time while the government figured out what to do. Katie did not believe they would figure out anything useful in 72 hours. But she followed her orders. The helicopter ride to the alien ship was the longest of Katie's life. Margaret Ellis sat beside her, reviewing notes on a tablet computer. She was a woman in her 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had negotiated with dictators and terrorists. She had faced down angry mobs and hostile governments. But even she looked nervous. "You think they can be reasoned with?" Katie asked. Margaret shook her head slowly. "I think they see us the way we see ants. You don't negotiate with ants. You step on them or you ignore them. Our job is to make them think we're worth ignoring." The helicopter approached the alien ship. A door opened in the side of the massive vessel, revealing a docking bay filled with strange machines. Katie guided the helicopter inside, following the landing lights that appeared in front of them. The door closed behind them. They were inside the enemy vessel. Kethrel was waiting for them with a group of alien soldiers. The soldiers carried weapons that looked like nothing Katie had ever seen. She made a mental note of their positions and their movements. Old habits from her combat training took over. Always know your enemy. Always look for weakness. "Welcome to the Void's Edge," Kethrel said. "I hope your journey was comfortable. Please follow me. I will show you the future that awaits your species." Katie followed, her eyes watching everything. She noticed the way the lights flickered in certain corridors. She noticed the humming sound that came from the walls. She noticed the patterns in the guards' patrol routes. None of this information might ever be useful. But then again, it might save her life. It might save all of humanity. The tour of the ship took several hours. Kethrel showed them the engine room, the weapons bay, and finally, the trophy room. This room contained objects from 100 different worlds. Weapons that no longer worked. Flags of nations that no longer existed. Preserved bodies of creatures that had resisted the Council and lost. "This is what happens to those who fight us," Kethrel said. "And this is what happens to those who cooperate." He gestured to a display showing images of alien cities, peaceful and prosperous. "The choice is yours. But choose wisely. The Council's patience is not unlimited." Katie looked at the trophies on the walls. She looked at the preserved bodies of alien creatures who had fought and died. She thought about her crew on the ship below. She thought about her family back home. And somewhere deep inside her, a fire began to burn. She did not know how yet, but she was going to find a way to fight back. Humanity was not going to end up as a trophy on an alien wall. The diplomatic mission returned to Earth with nothing but bad news. Secretary Margaret Ellis reported directly to President Cook in a secure room beneath the White House. She told him about the trophy room, about the dead species displayed like hunting prizes, about the calm certainty in Kethrel's voice when he spoke of humanity's future as slaves. "They don't see us as equals," Margaret said. "They see us as animals that need to be controlled. Negotiation is impossible because they don't believe we have anything worth offering." President Cook leaned back in his chair. He looked older than he had the day before. The weight of the world was literally on his shoulders, and it was crushing him. "What do you recommend?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "I recommend we start looking for ways to hurt them. If we can't reason with them, maybe we can make them afraid of us." In a Pentagon conference room, Katie Morrison was having a similar conversation with Admiral Gregory Hayes. The Admiral was a large man with white hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. He had commanded fleets and won battles. But now he faced an enemy that made all his experience seem useless. Katie showed him the data that Marcus Webb had gathered during their time near the alien ship. The shield fluctuation pattern. The 47-second window of weakness. The layout of the vessel's interior. The patrol patterns of the guards. "This is good information," Hayes admitted. "But what do we do with it? We can't fight 17 warships with our current technology. Even if we could hurt their main vessel, the fleet would destroy us." Katie nodded. "You're right, sir. We can't win a straight fight. But maybe we don't need to. When I was growing up in Nebraska, we had tornadoes every spring. My father never tried to stop the tornadoes. He built a storm cellar instead. He survived by being smart, not by being strong." Hayes stared at her for a long moment. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we find every weakness we can. I'm suggesting we build weapons that can exploit those weaknesses. And I'm suggesting we coordinate with every country on Earth. This isn't America's fight. This is humanity's fight." That night, Katie met with Dr. Samuel Price in a secret laboratory beneath the Nevada desert. Dr. Price was a physicist from MIT, a brilliant man who had spent his career studying things that most people thought were impossible. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was messy, and there were equations written on his arms in black marker. But his eyes were bright with excitement. "I've been studying their shield technology for years," he explained. "We recovered fragments from an alien probe that crashed in the Pacific Ocean back in 1998. The government kept it secret, but a few of us have been working on it ever since." He led Katie to a workbench covered with strange equipment. Their shields use quantum resonance to deflect energy. It's incredibly advanced. But here's the interesting thing. It's standardized. Every ship in the Galactic Council uses the same basic technology. They haven't changed it in thousands of years. "Why not?" Katie asked. Dr. Price smiled. "Because they haven't needed to. Nobody has ever challenged them seriously. They got comfortable. They stopped innovating. But we haven't stopped. We've been innovating since we discovered fire." He showed her a modified warhead that his team had built. It was designed to match the quantum frequency of the Velthari shields and pass right through them. In theory, it could destroy an alien ship with a single hit. In practice, nobody had ever tested it against a real target. "Can you make more of these?" Katie asked. "Give me 48 hours and all the resources I need." "I can make 100. Similar conversations were happening around the world. In Japan, a robotics expert named Dr. Yuki Tanaka was developing tiny drones that could interfere with alien sensors. In Brazil, an electrical engineer named Carlos Mendez was proposing a way to use Earth's entire power grid as a weapon. In Germany, a team of programmers was working on viruses that might be able to infect alien computer systems. And in a basement in Cleveland, a 16-year-old boy named Danny Russo was doing something that would change everything. Danny was a hacker, one of the best in the world, though nobody knew his real name. He had spent the last 24 hours trying to crack the encryption on Velthari communications. At 3 in the morning, he finally succeeded. He posted his findings on a hidden message board. By sunrise, intelligence agencies around the world were using his work to listen to the enemy's conversations. What they heard was both terrifying and encouraging. The Velthari were confident. They expected humanity to surrender. Their protocols had no plans for serious resistance. Ambassador Cathrell had reported some concerns about unusual human activity, but his superiors had dismissed these worries. Young species always panicked when they first met the Council. It meant nothing. Katie Morrison read the intercepted messages in her command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had been given temporary command of something called Operation Defiance. Her team included military officers from 12 different countries. Colonel Pierre Dubois from France, General Lin Xiaoming from China, Captain Joseph Abrams from Israel, others from Britain, Russia, India, Japan, and beyond. "They think we're going to roll over and die," Colonel Dubois said after reading the intelligence reports. "They have no idea what we're planning." "That's our advantage," Katie replied. "But it won't last long. Once we strike, they'll know we're a threat. We'll only get one chance at surprise. We need to make it count." On the alien ship, Cathrell was growing worried. The humans were too calm. They should have been panicking, rioting in the streets, begging for mercy. Instead, they seemed to be organizing. His spies reported unusual activity at military bases around the world, but they couldn't determine what the humans were doing. He contacted the Council to express his concerns. Supreme Arbiter Voss appeared on his screen, an ancient creature with skin like stone and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "You worry too much," Voss said. "The humans are primitive. They cannot threaten us. Proceed with the integration schedule." But Supreme Arbiter? They split the atom within decades of learning to fly. They built weapons that could destroy their own world. They adapt faster than any species I have ever studied. Voss made a sound that might have been laughter, and yet they use those weapons on each other. They are children playing with fire. When the deadline passes, they will surrender or they will burn. Either outcome serves the Council's interests. The transmission ended. Cathrell stood alone on his bridge, looking down at the planet below. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. He had never felt this uncertain before. Something about humanity bothered him. Something in their eyes when they looked at his trophy room. Not fear exactly. Something more dangerous, hope. He ordered the Thresher fleet to move closer to Earth. If the humans were planning something, he would be ready. He increased security around his ship. He doubled the guards at every entrance. He activated emergency protocols that had never been used before, and still, deep in his heart, he felt that it would not be enough. 40-8 hours remained until the deadline. In bunkers and laboratories around the world, humanity was preparing for the fight of its life. They did not know if they could win. They did not know if they would survive. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would not surrender. They would not become trophies on an alien wall. Whatever happened, humanity would face its fate on its feet, not on its knees. The next 48 hours became the most productive period in human history. Every scientist, engineer, and soldier on the planet worked toward a single goal. Sleep became optional. Food was eaten at workstations. Families said goodbye to each other, not knowing if they would ever meet again. The whole world held its breath and got to work in Nevada. Dr. Samuel Price and his team manufactured 100 quantum warheads. They worked in shifts, never stopping, never resting. Each warhead was carefully calibrated to match the frequency of Velthury shields. They loaded them onto missiles that submarines had carried into position in the Pacific Ocean. The missiles waited in their tubes like arrows ready to fly in Tokyo.
Akya.
Dr. Yuki Tanaka finished her swarm drones. There were millions of them, each no bigger than a housefly. They were designed to flood the sensors of alien ships, to create confusion and blind spots. They were packed into special containers that could be launched from aircraft. When released, they would spread across the sky like a cloud of angry insects. In Brazil, Carlos Mendez completed his most ambitious project. He had found a way to turn the Earth's power grid into a giant electromagnetic pulse weapon. The pulse would disable most electronics on the planet's surface, but it would also fry the circuits of any alien landing craft. It was a desperate measure, a weapon that would hurt humanity almost as much as it hurt the enemy. But desperate times required desperate measures. Danny Russo, a teenage hacker in Cleveland, had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were red, his fingers were sore from typing, and his room was filled with empty energy drink cans. But he had accomplished something amazing. He had not just cracked the Velthury communications. He had found a way into their computer systems. He had planted a virus that would activate at exactly the right moment and cause chaos throughout the enemy. Fleet. Katie Morrison coordinated all of these efforts from her bunker. She had a wall covered with screens, each showing a different part of the operation. She talked to generals and scientists, hackers and engineers. She made decisions that would affect millions of lives. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, but she refused to break. "How are we doing?" Colonel Dubois asked, walking over with a cup of coffee. Katie looked at the screens. "The warheads are ready. The drones are ready. The EMP is ready. Danny's virus is planted. But none of it matters if we don't survive long enough to use it." "What do you mean?" "We need to buy time. The moment we attack, they'll know we're fighting back. The Thresher fleet will respond. If they hit us before our weapons are in position, we lose everything." General Lin Xiaoming joined them. "Then we need a distraction. Something to keep them focused on the wrong thing while we prepare the real attack." Katie thought about this for a moment. Then she smiled. Secretary Ellis mentioned something about the Galactic Council's charter. Something about contested species having the right to trial by combat. What if we give them exactly what they expect, a surrender document? But hidden inside the surrender, we include a formal challenge under their own laws. Would that work? Dubois asked. It would confuse them. It would force them to respond according to their own rules. And it would buy us the time we need. She contacted Margaret Ellis in Washington. The Secretary of State listened to the plan and laughed, a tired but genuine laugh. "You want me to trick an alien empire with legal paperwork? Can you do it? Give me 4 hours. I'll have a document that looks like a surrender, but is actually a declaration of war. If they want to follow their own charter, they'll have to give us a chance to fight." Margaret assembled a team of lawyers and diplomats. They studied every word of the Galactic Council's charter, looking for loopholes and technicalities. They found Article 7, Section 3, a provision that allowed any species to challenge their classification through demonstrated military capability. It was meant for species that had already proven themselves. But the language was vague enough to be exploited. The surrender document was 47 pages long. It looked like complete capitulation. Every major leader on Earth signed it, but buried on page 47, in small print, was the challenge. Humanity was formally rejecting tributary status and demanding the right to trial by combat under the Council's own laws. Meanwhile, Katie prepared the military response. The submarines took their positions in the Pacific. Aircraft loaded with drone swarms flew to their launch points. Satellites carrying EMP weapons moved into orbit. Nuclear missiles that had been pointed at other countries were now pointed at the sky. For the first time in history, humanity was united against a common enemy. 20-4 hours before the deadline, Ambassador Kethrel summoned the human delegation back to his ship. He wanted to receive the surrender in person. He wanted to see humanity bow before the Galactic Council. Secretary Ellis boarded the transport with her diplomatic team. Katie Morrison flew the helicopter herself. She wanted to be there when the trap was sprung. She wanted to see the look on Kethrel's face when he realized he had been fooled. The alien ship was quiet. The guards seemed relaxed. They expected nothing but compliance. Kethrel waited in his command chamber, surrounded by advisors and soldiers. He looked pleased with himself. Another conquest for his record. Another tribute species added to the Council's domain. "Secretary Ellis," he said, spreading his arms in what might have been a welcoming gesture. "I trust you have brought good news." Margaret stepped forward and handed him the document. "Earth's official response," she said, "signed by every leader of every nation." Kethrel took the document with satisfaction. He began to read, his 4 eyes scanning the pages quickly. His expression shifted from smugness to confusion to disbelief. By the time he reached page 47, his scales had turned pale. "This is not a surrender," he said slowly.
Oh.
Margaret agreed. "It is not. You've challenged us under Article 7. You understand what this means? You understand that we can destroy you?" Margaret smiled. "We understand perfectly. The question is, do you understand what you're facing?" At that moment, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Danny Russo's virus had activated. Systems flickered and died. Lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, but critical functions were compromised. The navigation system showed the ship in 7 different locations at once. The weapon system refused to target anything smaller than a moon. Kethrel grabbed his communicator and tried to contact the Thresher fleet. Static answered him. The fleet was experiencing the same problems. Ships drifted off course. Shields cycled randomly. Commanders screamed for explanations that nobody could provide. "What have you done?" Kethrel demanded. Katie Morrison stepped forward. "We've done what humans always do when someone threatens our survival. We've fought back." Through the viewing ports, they could see lights in the sky, missiles rising from the ocean, drones spreading across the atmosphere. The attack had begun. Kethrel looked at the humans standing in his command chamber. He had underestimated them. The entire Galactic Council had underestimated them. And now, they were going to pay for that mistake. "You will die for this," he said. Katie shook her head. "Maybe, but we won't die alone. And we won't die as slaves." Outside, the first missiles reached their targets. The battle for Earth had begun. The first missile hit Kethrel's ship at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. Katie had memorized the shield fluctuation pattern weeks ago, and the weapon struck at the 47-second mark, when the barrier around the engines was weakest. The explosion was not large by galactic standards, but it was enough. The great warship shuddered. Warning lights flashed across every display. The engines, which had powered the vessel across countless star systems, began to fail. Katie felt the floor shake beneath her feet. She grabbed a railing to steady herself while Kethrel shouted orders at his crew. The alien soldiers raised their weapons, but they did not know who to aim at. The humans were not attacking them directly. The attack was coming from outside, from below. From everywhere at once? Get to the shuttle, Katie told Margaret Ellis. Get back to Earth. I'll stay here and make sure they can't stop the attack. Margaret hesitated. Katie, if you stay... go. That's an order. The Secretary of State ran toward the docking bay with her diplomatic team. Alien soldiers tried to stop them, but chaos had taken over the ship. Systems were failing. Doors were not opening. The virus that Danny Russo had planted was eating through the ship's computer network like acid in the skies above Earth. The drone's swarms met the Thresher fleet. The tiny machines could not damage the massive warships directly. That was not their purpose. They flooded sensors with false signals. They created phantom targets that distracted weapon systems. They gave the human missiles the time they needed to reach their targets. Dr. Samuel. Price watched the battle from the Nevada bunker. His quantum warheads were performing exactly as designed. The first dreadnought's shields flickered and died under the coordinated assault. A nuclear weapon, launched from a Russian submarine, struck the unprotected hull. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief new star in the night sky. 1 down, Price whispered. 16 to go. The Velthari commanders had never faced anything like this. Their tactics assumed technological superiority. Their protocols were designed for enemies who fought with predictable weapons and predictable strategies. Humanity was neither predictable nor rational by galactic standards. They attacked from unexpected directions. They used weapons that should not have been effective. They sacrificed ships and missiles with a recklessness that terrified the alien admirals. Carlos Mendez activated the satellite-based EMP weapons from his control station in Brazil. The pulses were targeted at the dreadnought's shield generators, disrupting the quantum fields that protected them. With each pulse, the alien ships became more vulnerable. With each pulse, more human weapons found their targets. 3 dreadnoughts fell in the first hour. Their crews had no time to escape. The ships broke apart and burned in Earth's upper atmosphere, raining debris across oceans and continents. 4 more fell in the second hour. The remaining 10 began to retreat, their commanders finally understanding that they were losing, but the battle was not over. Kethrel's ship was falling toward Lake Michigan. The engines were dead. The shields were gone. The crew was trying to abandon ship, but the escape pods were malfunctioning. Katie Morrison moved through the dying vessel like a ghost, sabotaging whatever she could find. Making sure the ship could not recover, she found Kethrel on the bridge. Surrounded by dead screens and desperate officers, he turned to face her with something like respect in his 4 eyes. "You have doomed your species," he said. "The Council will not forget this. They will send more fleets. They will burn your world until nothing remains." Katie shook her head. "Maybe they will. But they'll know we can hurt them. They'll know we're not easy prey. And maybe next time, they'll think twice before threatening us." The ship hit the water with a tremendous crash. The impact threw Katie against a wall. Everything went dark for a moment. When she opened her eyes, water was pouring in through cracks in the hull. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the flooding bridge. Kethrel was trapped under fallen equipment. His officers were dead or dying. He looked up at Katie with something that might have been a request for help. She could have left him to drown. Part of her wanted to, but Katie Morrison was not built that way. She pulled the debris off the alien ambassador and dragged him toward a hatch that still functioned. Together, they climbed out of the sinking ship and into the cold waters of Lake Michigan. Rescue helicopters arrived within minutes. Katie's crew had been tracking her position. They pulled her and Kethrel from the water and wrapped them in blankets. The alien looked broken, his scales dull with soot and lake water, his pride shattered beyond repair. Around the world, the celebrations were beginning. The Thresher fleet was in full retreat. 7 dreadnoughts had been destroyed. 3 more were heavily damaged. Only 7 escaped, relatively intact. They were running as fast as their engines could carry them. But the cost had been terrible. The EMP weapons had caused widespread damage. Power grids had failed across continents. Hospitals had lost electricity. Planes had fallen from the sky. 500,000 people were dead. And the number was still rising. President Cook addressed the world from a damaged broadcast studio. His face was tired, his voice was hoarse, but his words carried hope. Today, humanity faced the greatest threat in our history. We were told to surrender or die. We chose a third option. We chose to fight. And we won. Paused, looking directly at the camera. This victory came at a terrible cost. We have lost friends and family. We have lost cities and infrastructure. The road to recovery will be long and hard, but we are still here. We are still free, and we have proven that humanity will never bow to tyranny, no matter where it comes from. In the Nevada bunker, Dr. Price and his team were already analyzing the captured alien technology. The damaged dreadnoughts had left behind debris filled with advanced systems. In a matter of hours, human scientists were learning secrets that would have taken decades to discover on their own. In Cleveland, Danny Russo finally slept. He had been awake for almost 4 days. His mother found him passed out at his computer, surrounded by energy drink cans and scattered notes. She did not understand what her son had done, but she knew it was important. The whole world knew it was important. Katie Morrison sat in a medical tent near Lake Michigan, wrapped in a blanket, drinking coffee. Her crew had survived. Her ship had survived. She had survived. But she felt no joy. She felt only exhaustion and a deep awareness of everything that was coming. Next, Cathrell was taken to a secure facility in Geneva. He was now a prisoner, the first alien prisoner in human history. Intelligence officers wanted to question him. Scientists wanted to study him. Politicians wanted to use him as a bargaining chip. But Katie had other ideas. She visited him in his cell the next morning. He looked up at her with weary eyes. "What now?" he asked. "Now," Katie said, "you teach us everything you know about the Galactic Council. Their ships, their weapons, their politics, everything. Why would I help you?" Katie sat down across from him. "Because the Council abandoned you. They left you to die. And because if you help us, you might survive. If you don't, you're useless. And useless prisoners don't last long." Cathrell was silent for a long moment. Then he began to talk. 3 weeks after the battle, the Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. Supreme Arbiter Voss sat on his throne of polished stone, his ancient face showing something that his advisors had never seen before: uncertainty. Around him, the representatives of 100 different species waited in nervous silence. The news from Earth had spread across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Fleet Commander Thex stood before the assembly. His uniform was torn and dirty from the long journey home. He had commanded the Thresher Fleet, the most powerful military force the Council had deployed in centuries. Now he commanded only 7 damaged ships and crews that whispered of defeat. "The humans adapted faster than any species in our records," Dex reported. "They exploited vulnerabilities we did not know existed. They coordinated a global response in less than 3 days. They turned our own charter against us with legal arguments that our scholars are still trying to understand." "Impossible," said one of the council members. "A creature with wings like a bat and eyes like burning coals? They are primitives. They cannot possibly have the intelligence for such tactics." X shook his head. "I thought the same thing. I was wrong. We were all wrong. The humans are not primitive. They are simply young. And young species that survive their early years often become the most dangerous of all." Voss raised one hand for silence. "What do you recommend?" The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Everyone knew what Dex should recommend. He should call for total war. He should demand the destruction of Earth and everyone on it. That was the Council's way. That was how they had maintained control for 10,000 years. But Dex hesitated. "I recommend reclassification," he said quietly. Category 7. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Category 7 was reserved for the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Civilizations that could not be conquered and should not be challenged. There were only 4 Category 7 species in existence, and all of them had earned that status over millions of years. Humanity had earned it in 72 hours. On Earth, the cleanup was still underway. Power grids were being rebuilt. Hospitals were treating the wounded. Families were burying their dead. The victory had come at a terrible price, and everyone knew that the war was not really over. The Council would return. The question was not if, but when. Katie Morrison received a promotion that she did not want. She was now Rear Admiral Morrison, commander of the newly formed Earth Defense Coalition. It was a grand title for an organization that barely existed, but titles did not matter. What mattered was preparing for the next attack. She spent her days reviewing intelligence reports from Kethril. The alien ambassador had become a reluctant advisor, sharing secrets about the Council that no human had ever known. He told them about the political divisions within the galactic government. He told them about species that might be willing to trade with humanity. He told them about weapons and technologies that could be adapted for human use. "You realize this will not protect you forever," Kethril said during one of their sessions. "The Council has thousands of ships. What you defeated was a single fleet. They can afford to lose 100 fleets and still destroy your world." Katie nodded. "I know, but we've proven that destroying us will cost them something. And cost changes calculations. If attacking Earth means losing ships and soldiers, the Council might decide we're not worth the trouble. You are gambling your entire species on that assumption. What choice do we have?" Kethril had no answer for that question. Dr. Samuel Price led the team that reverse-engineered the captured. Within 6 months, they had developed new weapons, new shields, and new engines based on alien designs. Human scientists were learning faster than anyone had expected. They asked questions that alien engineers had never considered. They found solutions that should have been impossible. Danny Russo was offered scholarships from every major university on Earth. He turned them all down. Instead, he joined a secret government program dedicated to cyber warfare against the Council. His skills had saved humanity once. They would be needed again. Carlos Mendez designed a new generation of EMP weapons. It's more targeted and less destructive to human infrastructure. Dr. Yuki Tanaka built bigger and better drone swarms. Around the world, factories that had once produced cars and televisions now produced weapons and spacecraft. 1 year after the battle, the Earth Defense Coalition launched its first interstellar probe. It was a small vessel, cobbled together from human and alien technology, barely functional by galactic standards. But it worked. It left the solar system and headed toward the stars. The probe carried a simple message, broadcast on every frequency that the Council monitored. "Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for their visit. We look forward to returning the favor." Kethril watched the launch from his comfortable prison in Geneva. Katie Morrison stood beside him, arms crossed, a small smile on her face. "That message will terrify them," Kethril said. "The Council has never faced a species that could threaten their territory." "Good," Katie replied. "Good. You have made enemies of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. They will come for you. Not next year. Not in 10 years. But eventually they will come." Katie turned to face him. "Then we'd better be ready. We've got time to prepare now. Time to build ships. Time to find allies. Time to become something the Council can't ignore. And if your preparations fail, if the Council sends everything they have against you..." Katie looked out the window at the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars she could see, the Galactic Council was watching Earth. They were afraid of what humanity might become. That fear was the greatest weapon humans had ever possessed. "Then we'll do what we did before," she said. "We'll adapt. We'll innovate. We'll fight. And we'll make them regret ever noticing our little planet." Kethril was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your species is either the most brilliant or the most insane I have ever encountered. Why can't we be both?" In the command center of the Earth Defense Coalition, screens showed the progress of the interstellar probe. It was heading toward the border of Council space, carrying humanity's message to the galaxy. Behind it, hundreds of ships were under construction. Thousands of weapons were being manufactured. Millions of soldiers were being trained. The Galactic Council, They expected to find another tribute species on Earth. They had expected easy conquest and grateful surrender. They had expected to add one more trophy to their collection. Instead, they had awakened something they did not understand. A species that refused to accept its fate. A species that found hope in the darkest moments. A species that grew stronger every time someone tried to destroy it. President Cook addressed the world on the anniversary of the battle. 1 year ago, we were told that our future had been decided for us. We were told that we had no choice. We proved them wrong. Today, I want to make a promise to every human being on this planet and to every alien species in the galaxy. Humanity will never stop reaching for the stars. We will never stop growing, never stop learning, never stop fighting for our right to exist. The universe is vast and full of dangers, but so are we. The broadcast was transmitted into space, along with the probe's message. Somewhere in the galaxy. Alien listeners heard the words and wondered what kind of creatures could survive everything that had been thrown at them and still sound so confident. The answer was simple. Humans. They had been underestimated once. They would never be underestimated again. In her office, Katie Morrison looked at a picture on her desk. It showed her family farm in Nebraska, the storm cellar that her father had built, the fields that had survived 100 tornadoes. She had learned to survive there, in a place where the sky could turn deadly without warning. Now the whole sky had turned deadly, but humanity would survive that too. They would build their storm cellar among the stars. They would weather whatever storms came their way. And someday, when they were ready, they would venture out and show the universe what humans could really do. The Galactic Council had made a plan for Earth, but humanity had made a better one.